call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent at the moment. Ms. Brown? Here. Ms. Stevens? Ms. Stevens is absent. Ms. Simon? Ms. Baker? Here. Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Tuma?
Here.
Mr. Gallagher? Here. Mr. Schron?
Here.
Ms. Conwell?
Present.
Council President Brady?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Item number 3 on the agenda is public comment. Has anybody signed in?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We come to item number 4, matters referred to the committee. Second hearing on resolution 2019-0253.
Resolution number 2019-0253, determining to proceed with submitting to the electors of Cuyahoga County the question of a replacement of 3.9 mils of an existing Health and Human Services levy and an increase of 0.8 mil for the purpose of supplementing general fund appropriations for health and human or social services for a period of 8 years outside the 10 mil limitation in accordance with the provisions of section 5705.192 of the Ohio Revised Code and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Thank you very much. As everybody knows, the process of placing one of these levies on the ballot is a two-step process. First, we have to pass a piece of legislation determining the necessity, which we did last week, and after that legislation is passed, the fiscal officer has to certify the exact fiscal implications of the levy into the second resolution, which is the one that is before us this afternoon. The fiscal officer has now done so, and you have in front of us the revised version with the blanks filled in and the financial implications certified by the fiscal officer. So I would like to ask if I could have a motion to accept that version as a substitute, making it the proper version before this committee.
So moved.
Any discussion? Okay, and I see Vice President Jones is joining us for the meeting, and we are about to vote on a technical substitute. This is a substitute that simply incorporates the fiscal officer's financial information after we pass the resolution of necessity. It incorporates that into this resolution. So on the question of accepting the substitute as the version before the committee, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the substitute is accepted as the version of Resolution 2019-0253 before this committee. And I would now call forward Director Parfiowitz to make a presentation responding to the questions that the council members put forward at the last hearing on this matter.
Good afternoon, Council President Brady, Council Vice President Jones, Council Chair Miller, members of Council, Walter Parfiowitz from the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm here with Mike Chambers from the Fiscal Office. Just to go over one more time, the 3.9 mil levy is a smaller of the two Health and Human Services levies. The levy currently generates approximately $104 million annually. The proposed levy, if approved by the voters, will generate an additional $35 million annually. $41.58 is the cost per year based on a home valued at $100,000. If approved, the replacement and the increase will total 4.7 mils and generate $139 million annually. We're requesting County Council place the 3.9 mils replacement and the increase of 0.8 mil to the Health and Human Services levy on the March 17, 2020 primary ballot. We'll start now with the questions. The first question was use of a replacement versus increased money. So again, 3.9 million, I'm sorry, 3.9 mil is the 11, 0.8 mil is the 24, 4.7 mil in total, 35 million. The chart depicts the programs down the left-hand side with appropriate columns for replacement and increase. The replacement will go $250,000 to the Cleveland Road Crisis Center, $250,000 Cleveland Adoption Network, $5 million for inflation, $5 million for expenses currently subsidized by the general fund. The increase, the $25 million will go to the 5.1 will go to the Adams Board, $2 million to Senior Adult Services, $725,000 to Family and Children First Council, $5 million for UPK to Invest in Children, $6 million for Kinship Care Program at Children and Family Services, $1 million for staffing at Job and Family Services for the call center, $2.5 million for the diversion center, and $2,175,000 for homeless services for permanent housing. Again, a replacement being the 11 and increase being 24, for a total of 35. All of these are all subject to the executive and county council approval. The next question was about levy funds in the city of Cleveland. So what I did here was I listed all programs by department, what's budgeted currently in the Health and Human Services levy, the percent of the levy dollars that go to Cleveland or Cleveland residents, and then the total, the translation. The Health and Human Services budgeted dollars with the appropriate percentage for the amount of levy dollars used for Cleveland. There are 4 items on here. Say Yes to Education, 100% Cleveland. Mom's First program at Invest in Children, 100%. Closing the Achievement Gap, FCFC, 100%. Planned Parenthood at FCFC, 100% as well, all going to Cleveland. The others, it's a proportionate share of those costs based on the clients they serve by those divisions. The next document is it's a supplementary document the Adams Board provided to show clients served by city or municipality. You'll see that in Cleveland, it's 57% overall. The next slide is Metro Health. It's just a map overall of the entire county and where their clients reside. The next question was about UPK funds. What was committed or proposed? I believe the original goal was $100 million. I haven't found that in print anywhere, but I believe it was $100 million. What's been realized? Private funds of $12,772,840 and public funds of $10 million for a total of $22,772,840. I do have some detail on the private funds. The next slide is data requested on the Kinship Care Program. Just to define kinship care, it's temporary or permanent placement with a relative or non-relative adult who has a long-standing relationship or bond with the child or a family. I used 2018's data. I don't have 19's final numbers, so I just went with 18. Children and Family Services in December of 2018 had 1,603 kids in board and care placements that cost us that year $52.4 million. DCFS also has 773 kids in kinship placements with the cost of about $2.7 million. The proposal, and I worded it as maybe, paying $500 per child per month in a kinship care program. Initially, they would add costs for the 773 kids in kinship care placements now, and the savings will come by moving lower level kids from the traditional board and care placements to kinship care placements. The next question was data on the diversion program. We're waiting on a consultant to provide a report, but the goal here is to divert clients with mental illness from jail. The goal is to improve the quality of life for those with mental illness. Currently, the cost of jail is approximately $110 per day. The county's talking with St. Vincent Charity and Metro Health Hospitals, seeking additional beds for a diversion center. The remaining questions. There was a question about the number of uninsured in the Justice Center that are 30 years or younger. We weren't able to provide that data at this time. We think we can still get it. It'll just take us a little bit longer. Another question was final diversion center review from the consultants, and we're waiting on that report. And we will provide those answers once we receive them. I'll be sure to send it over. So in conclusion, we'd ask the voters to approve the following on the March 17, 2020 ballot. The replacement of the 3.9 mils Health and Human Services levy and an increase of 0.8 mil.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. I would now like to open the floor to questions specifically related to the director's answers to the council questions. And then after we've heard those questions, then we'll open it up to any other kind of questions or discussions. Do we have any comments, Ms. Conwell?
Through the chair to Walter P. On the data on kinship program,
Yes.
could you figure out, can you give a dollar amount to, I know you stated initially you will add the cost for the 773 kids, but based on the numbers that we have there now and your $500 proposal, could you come back with a dollar amount for that?
Of course. I do have a proposal that we provided to the county executive about a month ago in a strategic planning session. It's general as well, but it does have some of the numbers I think you're looking for.
And from your memory, would that number be less than the 52.4 we've spent already?
Oh, absolutely. We were looking at trying to reduce board and care by 50%, shifting those kids over to kinship placements and reallocating those dollars.
Okay, and going back to what you stated, you provided the executive with what?
It was a proposal during one of his strategic planning sessions over at the convention center.
And you can share that with us?
Sure, of course.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay, Council President Brady.
Yeah, it's just actually a comment, but it has to do with one of the responses that the director gave. And if the chairman keeps pronouncing your name, I'm going to be able to do it myself pretty soon.
It's okay.
No, it's okay. I think I've figured it out. Parfialis? Is that
Close.
good enough?
Close,
Well,
yes.
I'm working on it.
Well, thank you.
Fanatic at this point. No, you had mentioned about somebody had asked about how many people who were incarcerated under the ages of 30 had insurance, I believe. That was the question. It's not in front of me because it was on the screen.
30 years and younger.
And I don't as well know the answer to that, but I do know that our own information tells us that. Bear with me. Change sides that something. 3 out of 4 people under 30 years old in the county are uninsured. So it gives you a kind of a peg to look at in terms of that particular question.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
It wasn't actually a question.
Councilman Tron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We heard at the last meeting that a lot of these funding, these monies that we're going to be funding with this $35 million were aspirational. On kindred care, I think you just indicated that we're spending currently $52,400,000.
Councilman Strawn, that's 52.4, that's on board and care.
Right, on boarding care. Yeah. And we're currently spending another 2.7 million.
Right. That's primarily that's in supportive costs. That's daycare, some food, some clothing for the kids when the family members take them.
And I think you just indicated that by doing the kinship care, we're going to save 50%. So my back of the envelope math says you just came and told us by doing this one function, you're going to save us $26 million.
We would save $26 million, but we would have a kinship care cost.
Of $5 million.
I think it would be higher. We would have to pay for the 773 currently in kinship care at $500 per child per month. And in addition, for the kids that we shifted over, we were looking at 500 to 800 kids to shift over from board and care to kinship care would also come with the cost.
Okay, so that would be total how much?
I don't have those numbers yet.
Have you done a business case study on this, that we're asking the taxpayers to do an aspirational expenditure for the next 8 years times this $6 million or $5 million, whatever you're talking about, every year for the next 8 years? Have you done a business case study on this?
I have not.
So we're going to be asking the taxpayers to come up with $35 million, the biggest single expenditure, with no business case study. Sounds an awful lot like our ERP package, to be honest, that we're about ready to go down another path on a aspirational goal, on a dream. And you're telling us 50% is going to be saved, which just that difference alone is $26 million per year.
We're hoping to save 26 million and spend a good portion of that on kinship, but ultimately end up with the savings.
Where is that written in any of these pieces of paper that those, I'm not sure what the number is, but doing my
it's
back
not
of the
there.
envelope, it looks like at least it's a minimum of $20 million you're forecasting as savings.
I think $20 million is aggressive.
Okay, give me a non-aggressive number, 15?
I would say 5 or 10.
Wow. Where's that showing up in any of these things we're asking the taxpayers?
It's not there.
And yet this body is going to be doing an aspirational expenditure here by next week and a half without even having a $10 to $15 million savings allocated. Let's keep on going. Say yes for education.
Correct.
You were in Buffalo.
I was.
How many schools do they show you?
1.
Out of all the entire schools in Buffalo, they gave you one example. Is that an indication? You're a business guy, you know. Would you do that to anybody to try and show you a clear example of something that's working? Yes or no?
No, I think they should have showed us more.
And here we are getting ready to spend another $5 million on another aspirational piece. I really hope this body is listening to your answers, because this is what we're asking all 1.3 million people in this county to stand behind. Is there a business case study for this one?
I believe we do have that business case study.
Okay, but would you rely on that if you only saw one school as being a measurement for success?
Myself, no.
On this, we also show $5 million coming back that the taxpayers are going to be putting in for the next 8 years, $40 million that we're allocating back as a refund back to the from Health and Human Services back to the general fund. Is that how we should be going out and asking for an increase on Health and Human Service levy? To refund the general fund?
In this case, I believe we were over and the general fund covered the shortage. And
I know how we got there. But we're asking the taxpayers to go back and increase this so we could back and refund the general fund. I have no other questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Council President.
thank you very much. I think what's important to take into consideration here is both in terms of the kinship program, what we're aspiring to do, it's just aspirational, but what we're aspiring to do is for people to be more likely to grow up in a home where they have a connection, where they're part of a family. And there's no question that over time it will save money. If it hasn't been quantified to your satisfaction, then I understand that. Sometimes these things are not that easy to quantify. But the point of what we're trying to do, and the fact that over time it will save money, are not really in question. In terms of Say Yes to Education, we're trying to help people who need help. That's what we're trying to do. So, we could have a hearing about that issue, and we have, all by itself. But the point is, what is it that we're trying to actually accomplish here? And I have no intention as a council president of proposing that the general fund be paid back. I don't see it as a payback. What we do know is that if we're able to fully fund our health and human services with our health and human service levy, then we won't have to dip into the general fund as much, which will give us more money in the general fund for economic development proposals that I know that you're for every single one of them, and that money has to come from somewhere. And so there'll be more of that money available if we're able to pay for Health and Human Services Fund through our levy and not just through dipping into the general fund. And that would be my response.
Other questions? Ms. Simon.
I just have a question because, we can go through all these numbers and programs and will we save money and how much? Of course, we're going to save money. But at the end of the day, if we stay on task where we are with the levy, it's going to run out at some point, is it not? I mean, are we destined to go into our reserve? And if we're going to continue to fund programs as we currently are, I thought that we can't maintain our programming as it is, notwithstanding the opioid crisis and everything else we're facing going forward with trying to do some justice reform.
Yes, that's correct. I believe we run out of money in 2020. I'm sorry, 21.
Thank you.
Vice President Jones.
And to the point of Say Yes to Education, we know they came before us and simply said they were working to send every child from the city of Cleveland off to college.
Correct.
Every graduating student from the community off to college. And we know that Family and Children First Council came before us during the budget time and stated one of their metrics was that they had increased graduation rates by 86%. That's certainly higher than City of Cleveland's overall graduation rate. So the impact that Family and Children First Council's work has had on the graduation rate is impactful, and those graduating children get funded into Say Yes to Education, and their work has met the metrics that Say Yes to Education has stood before us and asked the city of Cleveland and the county to aspire to for the work they're doing. So thank you.
You're welcome. I just want to Say Yes to Education program provides family and support specialists for 106 schools, and in addition does pay for college and vocational costs beyond Pell Grants.
Council President Brady.
Thank you. Some additional information I just wanted to share with my colleagues to put this into some perspective is that when we take the largest counties in Ohio, Franklin, Montgomery, which is Dayton, Hamilton, which is Cincinnati, and Cuyahoga, the total millage right now, and some of these counties have mental health levies, some have senior levies. It's not all the same, but this would be the total of the kinds of things that we pay for with our Health and Human Service levy. Franklin County millage is 8.95. Montgomery is 14.24. Hamilton is 13.75. Franklin, of course, and Cuyahoga are more analogous because they're the largest counties, except, of course, we have more poverty than Franklin County. Ours is 8.70. Our millage is less than the other three large counties in this state, just to put things into perspective.
I'd like to offer a couple of comments. First, about the kinship care. My question is not so much about a business plan is more about a human services plan. I have questions as to whether it's really going to be possible for half of the people in board and care to be moved to kinship care. A large percentage of the people in children in board and care are people with pretty severe problems and special needs, and we may or may not be able to find appropriate kinship care placements for that many of them. I certainly support the kinship care program and believe that it's going to be beneficial for the health and welfare of our community. But as to how many can be moved and how much savings can be achieved, I think it's going to depend more on what's possible in terms of human services as opposed to what the numbers say. As regards to the Say Yes for Education program, I would just remind everybody that this program has only been done in 4 other cities in the United States, and I do believe that it's the state of the art, that it reflects the broadest and most comprehensive approach to helping potentially disadvantaged children reach their highest potential, both in terms of academics and social behavior, and also enabling them to go to college or other post-secondary training and helping them with the finances to do so. So I certainly believe that the Say Yes to Education program is the part that being asked to do is a relatively small part of it. We're one of like 5 or 6 other partners, and so I certainly think it's a reasonable thing for us to do. Any other questions, either on the director's presentation or any other questions or comments related to this legislation? Councilman Gallagher.
After the last meeting, I went back and checked on the pre-K. There was a promise of $100 million. They didn't deliver. They came in with 12, but we keep up in ours. So who cares here? The private sector who comes in here and they say never call anybody a liar, but strangers to the truth, and then we have to keep pumping money in. That makes me feel a little bit queasy about Say Yes to Education. Now, are we the last money in or the first money in? You know, who's putting the most in here, and are they going to show up? We don't know that. And ultimately, does it work? Again, aspirational. Everything's on a wing and a prayer here. But looking at this, and it's much like the budget, we could pick it apart and find things that are good and find things that are bad. But on this group of where we're going to invest this extra money, if indeed it passes, who decided this? Clearly there wasn't anybody from council. Clearly there wasn't anybody from the executive team. Who put this list together?
I believe it was a combined effort, some council members along with the county executive.
So these are the wishes of the council, at least some council members in the executive team.
That is my understanding.
Gee, I didn't get a phone call, so this was kind of a surprise to me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Tron.
I've heard a number of people say this is kind of like the budget, and there's things that are good and things that are bad, and we can disagree or agree. the difference between this and the budget is the budget is a 2-year commitment that we, in the course of that budget, do have the ability to make a change, or if something is going awry. And we actually have seen with the fact that we had allocated budget for the ERP, that didn't even hold a candle to where we're going, even though it was budgeted, and we could all have a conversation about it. But unlike the budget, these aspirational goals, we're telling the taxpayers, you're going to pay for these goals and objectives today for the next 8 years. The next 8 years, even though we haven't done a business plan on it, and the reason the value of a business plan makes sense is because you look at the costs, the expenditures, the savings the 50% savings you just allocated, all those kind of things would show up as to what it is, and where does that extra 5 or 10, you talk about savings of $10 million, that's real money to the people outside here, and it should be real money here too. How can we multiply that times 8 years? That's $80 million that you're talking about in savings, that we don't have any conversation about where it's going to go. So unlike the budget, we're asking the people outside this room to do two things. We're asking them to pass a replacement levy, which I will have no objection to that because it does have inflationary costs. It does build that in, and you're the first person that I think I've heard say that it won't cover our cost of programs. I thought it did cover the cost of the programs. It doesn't cover the cost of the new aspirational programs that we don't have even on the books yet, but I thought that $11 million for the next 8 years would have covered that. Is that?
I don't believe that's the case.
Okay. The $88 million will not cover our current programs with what we have in place?
You mean the $80 million? $80 million coming back from
No.
Morgan Care?
No.
Oh, the 0.8 mil increase.
Not the increase, the replacement.
The replacement.
The replacement raises $11 million per year.
Correct.
Times 8, my quick math was $88 million.
I believe the documents that I saw that projected out going 8 years was that it would not cover.
Okay. Till what period? You said
I think that I saw 21.
it's only got an $11 million increase is only going to cover us for 2 years. Okay, you're the first. I thought that I'm hearing that. So the rest of this, the other balance between the 11 and the 30, the 35 million is what we're asking the taxpayers to pay from now and forever, at least for the next, now to the next 8 years. So it's not the budget. It's not the same thing as a budget where you can pick and choose and change things from one year to the next if you need to on your biannual budget. This is a commitment these taxpayers are going to make, even though we just, I think, saw in the paper that the housing stock is going up again. The value, everything indicates that it's going to continue to go up. So that when this comes into play next year, we'll be in a good position for the replacement levy. Thank you.
Ms. Baker.
Yeah, I guess I want to be clear. We talked last time about wanting to know what programs were new and what programs were existing. And I see here on page 2, use of replacement versus increased money. But did you give us, and if I'm sorry if I missed it because I'm just looking at this tonight, what programs are new and what programs are existing?
The new programs are kinship, diversion.
Where is that listed?
It's in the increase.
Oh, it's on page 2?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm
so
sorry.
can you just go down the list then?
Sure. Page 2. The new programs are under Children and Family Services. The $6 million there is kinship care. The $2.5 million for the diversion center. And I believe the new cost that would continue if we choose to do so would be Cleveland Rape Crisis and Cleveland Adoption Network. They were included in the 2020 budget, from what I understand.
And if you were to add Children and Family, Diversion Center, which Children and Family includes the kinship,
Correct.
and the Rape Crisis Center and Adoption Network, what kind of money are you looking at out of the 35 million that we're increasing?
That's about $9 million.
About 9. So the other 25 million continues what we already have in place?
Those are additions to what we already have in place.
Which is the 25 or the 9?
The 25.
So 25 million is paying for
The Adams Board, Senior and Adult Services, Family and Children First Council.
existing programs.
Correct. But enhancing them.
So I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. How much of that 24.5 then? I mean, can you tell us what is enhancement and new and what is existing that we're paying for?
Sure. Should we just go down the list? Yes. Okay, Adams Board, existing program, but in being enhanced. Senior and Adult Services, those are existing programs as well, being enhanced. Family and Children First Council, existing programs being enhanced. Invest in Children, that's a $5 million commitment for existing UPK program. $6 million is for a new kinship program for DCFS. The $1 million for Job and Family Services, hiring additional workers. It's not new. Cleveland Rape Crisis, that's new to me. It's the first time that I've seen it. Cleveland Adoption Network, same thing, $250,000, that's new. Diversion Center, $2.5 million is new. Homeless Services is permanent supportive housing, $2,175,000. That's an existing program, but an enhancement. And then the last two being inflation and expenses subsidized by the general fund.
So I guess where the gray area is, in Adams Board, Senior Adult Services, Family and Children Council, all these enhanced programs, homeless services, how much of that is new programming? If you're enhancing it, that means it's new, am I right? Or you're just expanding?
We're expanding an existing program.
That's still new, though. That still is doing something different than what we're doing today. So is it possible to know what we would have to continue doing as we are doing today, and then how much of that we are enhancing? Can you break that out for us?
Sure.
Just to know if that's a 50-50 number, a 25-75 number, how much more are we adding for those services that is taking it from what we're doing today to what we would like to see it? That would be helpful.
I can do that.
Okay.
Council President Brady.
Thank you. And following up on Councilwoman Baker, and part of what we're trying to do here is not just tread water. We talked before about the challenges and the level of poverty that we have. If we want to just tread water, do what we've always done, we're never going to get ahead. We're never going to solve these problems. We're never going to chip away at them. We're only going to hopefully help from keeping them get worse. The idea of enhancing the programs is to get ahead of the problem, to start making progress on the problem. The new initiatives like kinship are to get ahead of the problem and maybe save some money. The diversion center that's been kicked around for a couple of years here is an important aspect of this. We've got in this Health and Human Service budget built in $2.5 million a year for the next 8 years. Those are operating funds. That's in order for us to get ahead of a problem. We can tread water. We can spend no money and we can tread water here, but we're not going to be in any better shape. The only way we're going to make any progress in solving our problems is to enhance our programs and trying to find creative ways to do things that will help us get ahead of our problems. And I think that's an important distinction in how we're looking at the numbers here. We're trying to make progress, not just stay where we are in the situation that we're in. And in terms of the diversion center, for instance, that could be a situation that I think should be up for discussion in terms of the opioid funds, which we've talked about several times here. But the difference is that what we've got here with Health and Human Services operating funds To build a detention center takes capital funds. Those capital funds could be, this is not even on the table, could be out of the opioid funds. We could pay for the diversion center. That will get us ahead in terms of keeping people out of our jails. We know what the problems are there. So just one last time, if you want to stay where you are, you can stay where you are. But if you want to get ahead of the problem, and you want 8 years from now to be in better shape than we are now, then we've got to do something about it. And I think that the Health and Human Service Levy reflects an attempt to do that.
Vice President Jones.
I'm just so glad that the chairman or the council president brought that point out. As we know, we moved the opiate dollars into their own dedicated fund. But those dollars are still in our thought process, are a part of the human services that are needed to meet the needs of this community. They certainly will be using some complementary way that this body will certainly have their say in how they are used. But it is part of the conversation.
To follow up on what the council president said, I would remind everybody that the programs that respond to the immediate needs, the children in care, the hospital emergencies and such things, important as those services are, those are the things that are state mandated, that we're required to do regardless. It's the programs that give us the chance to maybe make our community better, to help more people move out of poverty and into living wage employment, to help people prevent opiate addiction and get a good early start in life through early education. These are the kind of things that are not state mandated and therefore are liable to be cut or discontinued if funding is insufficient. And so if our community is going to be healthier, stronger, better, more inclusive, more diverse 8 years from now than it is today, I think we do need to move forward on this. Any further comments, Councilman Tron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You just went over, Councilwoman Baker, new versus enhanced in some of these programs. In the Adams Board, could you go back? I just want to hear that one again. Was that new or enhanced, the 5.1?
That's enhanced.
Okay. So, and we're just requested $10 million by the Adams Board from the opiate. Is that correct?
I believe they received money. I'm not sure what the amount was.
I think it was $10 million. So they, between this budget and what they just received, they received $10 million from the opioid, and this is another $5 million on top of that every year for the next 8 years.
Right. This I believe what I read was that
Is that correct?
No, that's actually not true. The opioid money is separate.
I understand.
It passes through them. What they got was they've been flat funded for 6 years. What they were given by this budget, and only for next year, because if the Health and Human Service Levy doesn't pass, there won't be any more money. Only a $1 million for next year was the only extra money they got out of this budget. They will not be able to function flat funded. They need this money to continue to do the work that they do. So they did not get $10 million. That was a pass through for opioid, for opioid program.
Thank you.
Other discussion? Well, I would remind everybody that the filing deadline for the March 17th primary is December 18th, and we have just one more council meeting on December 10th prior to the deadline. If we're going to place it on the ballot at that time, we should move this legislation to the full council with recommendation for second reading suspension. So if there's a motion, somebody can offer it.
So moved.
The motion is to refer Resolution 2019-0253 to the full council with recommendation for second reading suspension. Any further discussion?
Just one more comment, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, because I there's so much here that it's easy, you can't speak to all of it. But we discussed recently about how the community is not only poorer than we wish it was, distinctly poorer than many other communities, but that we're also getting older, and that we have an older community here, and we're becoming, the numbers, I forget the statistics are in here, but we are an aging county. And so for services that we spend for seniors, for instance, if we don't enhance those services, clearly we're not going to be able to keep up with the fact that we're getting older. We can't spend the same amount of money and be able to expect to provide services for this community as it gets older if we don't enhance services for seniors, which is something I think we should take a strong look at enhancing.
Councilman Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm gonna vote to move this forward, and the reason being is I am not yet on board because of this list, and knowing that it is subject to the executive and council approval, I'm hopeful that if and when it does get to the ballot, that I can be supportive. But I think this list, as it sits right now, I said it before, is your torpedo. I think if this is enhanced and done the right way with a little bit more input and the support of, if not all of council and majority of council, I think the electorate will be more informed and of the opinion that it's needed. And I don't think anybody questions whether or not it's needed. We're a poor community, we're an old community, we're not getting any richer, and we're not getting any younger.
Councilman Tron.
As I think the chairman's aware that I do have amendments that I'd like to put forth, and you being our parliamentarian on a regular basis, when would you like me to present those?
I think that now is as good a time as any.
Okay. Well, I think everybody has the amendments that I submitted, and everybody had a chance, hopefully, to look at them. And the amendments are to ask. Oh, sorry. Hopefully you got them all last week, but if you didn't, we'll get the hard copy. I think we all took a break. Just our reading list has been fairly long. My assumption is that we won't need to go over the other ones until you get to the first one. If the first one doesn't go through, then the other three are moot. But they're in concert with what we had submitted and everybody got last week. And it's in keeping with, matter of fact, would you like me to move the first one and have a second so we can have a discussion?
Yes, please.
Yes. The first one is based on the theme of separating the replacement from the new increase. So if you could just, I will move that, though it's not numbered, it's resolution 2019 with a replacement on that levy, on that resolution. And I'll so move the first item for discussion purposes.
I'll give a second.
Okay. Thank you.
So if I understand this, what you're proposing to do is to substitute the motion that we have on the floor with an alternative that would provide that we're only doing a replacement.
It would be an alternative to do a replacement. If successful, then I would put on the second item.
Right.
But I don't think it's appropriate to put all four on at the same time.
I think you're doing it in the right way. Please proceed.
Thank you. Yeah, the first item, but just so there's clarity, it would be that if successful, the replacement would then follow on with a new increase of the same amount that's been recommended. So that would follow on as a second item.
Okay, fine.
And the purpose is that, as we've discussed, that we sit here and say that we're the voted body to bring forth actions and recommendations. That's true, but we are also the body that goes back to the taxpayers and asks them for their opinion in regards to items out there. In regards to this particular item, all we're doing is saying to the taxpayers to separate the replacement from the increase and ask the voters, just as my colleague Gallagher, Councilman Gallagher suggested. If we can make the case, then we make the case for the increase for that as a separate standalone item. But it says that if we do the replacement, you will be raising $11 million based on the new property values that are in place at the time that this would be passed. So I bring this forth not with the intent of usurping our authority, but to do just the opposite, to be providing the taxpayers and asking them for their honest opinion as to what it is that they think is appropriate. And some people say, well, gee whiz, they will vote only on the lower replacement and not for the replacement and the separate increase. If that's what the taxpayers wish, why wouldn't we as a body ask for that opinion? So with that, that's the purpose for segregating and separating. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. It's on the floor, and Council President Brady.
Thank you,
Followed
Mr.
by
Chairman.
Baker.
Just wanted to ask the sponsor, is the replacement levy an eight-year replacement levy?
Yes, I believe it would.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I know that even if the voters chose to do that it would not be adequate for us to sustain social services in the county for anything near 8 years. So I couldn't possibly vote in the affirmative for this particular amendment.
And you do have the opportunity in 4 years again to be brought forth with the increase that you're asking for at this time. So should that be necessary?
Are you really indicating that you think we could get by for 4 years and that you would be supporting an increase 4 years from now?
If at that point in time we'll have done the homework on these programs in the background as to why we think that these things like the kinship care make sense to be spending it, we could be doing things like pilots and actually testing it.
I guess if we want to take 100 years to get things done, that might be one approach. I don't support it.
Ms. Baker.
Yes, and as Council President Brady reiterated from the last meeting of those that are truly in need here in our county, there's no question of that. But I also think, there's a flip side here that there are those that are aging that aren't in need of county services, but also are on limited incomes. And they're trying to get their house paid off. They're trying to pay their taxes. They're trying to pay all their bills, take care of their families. We have people that are working that have $150,000, $200,000 homes that are struggling every day without needing of county services, but are paying their taxes for those that are less fortunate. I think a $41.58 per 100,000 is a huge ask. It's big. It's bigger than I think anyone realizes when they say yes or no on the ballot. We're going from a replacement levy of $13.58 to a $41.58, and that's just $100,000 homes. We have $150,000, $200,000, $250,000, $300,000 homes. And even in that price range, those people are not wealthy. They just work hard, and they've been able to accomplish. And to have a replacement levy go down would be devastating to this county. It'd be devastating. We can talk about how long a replacement levy will last, but if it doesn't pass at all, if we lose this replacement levy plus the increase, then what do we do in November? Do we ask again for a replacement levy plus an increase? Do we ask for a replacement levy? Do we ask for a renewal? I mean, then we're really scrambling with the same circumstances we have in front of us today. And I think that that's something we haven't really given a lot of consideration, is to those that just can't afford it, are not in need of our services, are aging out, they're not working, they're retired, and they're trying to do the best they can in a county that they're trying to live within and not move to another county for less taxes. So that is my concern here, is that the ask is big. I think we have a lot of well-intended programs, but it's an awful lot to ask our taxpayers. And especially, as I said last time, in this environment where I'm not sure we have the overwhelming support of asking for an ask like this. And I would certainly be disappointed to know that a replacement levy didn't pass. And then we're caught in November trying to figure out and scramble as to what we think will. And that is where I'm at on this.
We have Ms. Conwell followed by Council President Brady.
Through the chair to just on the statements that I've heard, I agree to a certain degree that property taxes are going up. And this is why I have been trying to talk to legislators downstate that would actually change how we value our school systems and taking everything from property taxes. I think that our state legislators that are sitting in these seats, instead of talking about abortion and all these other things that have been signed, sealed, and proven, to really look and focus on the things that are hurting all of us, no matter what side of the aisle that you're sitting on, is property taxes. And basing everything on property taxes is pulling from everyone. We sit in these seats and we have to make determinations because we're faced with only pulling from property taxes right now because our state legislators are not looking at other creative ways in their seats that they're sitting. And I just don't believe that these levy dollars are not being appropriated correctly. I get it that we're pulling from property taxes, but most of these things that are listed in here are trying to get us out of the situations that we have, the growing numbers that we have, the jails. We've got the opiate funds now currently with the jails. We need to utilize that in tangent with the mental health and not criminalizing people that have mental health going to jails. So do we hold that opiate funds until if this goes forth? Do we hold it so it can work together in tangent, or do we spend it up and then still kind of be back in the same boat? The kinship care, we can't control the numbers, and a lot of those are drug and alcohol related cases that families are losing their kids. So once again, the opiate funds that we have should be used in tangent with some kind of program, which Walter is trying to work on. I'm with you on most of the times the administration presents something to us that doesn't have the details out, but this one I have to step outside the box and disagree, because I'm trying to work with Wise Cotw and Administrator P in regards to these issues, because the numbers are increasingly growing. And unless even though the details are not spread out for us today, me and Walter meet on a monthly basis, and that's where I'm at. Every month, I want to know where we are, how closer they are to the details, so we can actually get a good dollar figure. And just to comment on something Chairman Miller stated about the board and care. Yes, I don't think in my mind that I believe that all of the board and care can go to kinship, but even if a slight number goes, then we're going to hold that board and care. And as the new cases of families and when they go to court about the kinship care, we'll be able to present that children have an option to go and live with their families instead of being in foster care. So I don't want to say that it's going to eliminate it totally, but it won't expand at the rate that it's going. And I just wanted to put that out there. I can have some agreements to a certain degree, but I also know as a taxpayer, if we just do the replacement, there's no way that they're gonna come back next year and increase $11 million or whatever we need.
Council President Brady.
Thank you, and I think Councilwoman Connell makes some good points. And responding to Councilwoman Baker, and I know it is a sincere proposal. What I think would happen is if we simply replace the levy, is we would be back here 2 years from now, just same situation, looking at an increase. The voters look at a replacement as an increase anyway. And they would be then looking at us and saying, we're looking at a second increase now. If we went what would happen if we lose is what your good point. Would we lose that replacement? Yes, we would lose that replacement. We would lose that replacement, but that replacement will not be enough to get us by anyway. We would, what we would have to do in the fall, if we lose, is go for a renewal. It's the only thing we could do that would be completely safe within a certain, degree of certainty of, that like anything else. And we would still have to raise money, and we would still have to run campaigns, because we always do that in renewal. And, some people do that and some people don't have to do that. But we would end up in the same place with a renewal. In my mind, 2 years from now, we'll be back here looking at an increase again, and not having caught up and be behind in terms of the money that we would have brought in. And so either way, a replacement or a renewal in the fall, if we're not successful, will bring us right back to where we are 2 years from now, in this very same spot, debating over an increase, how much it would be, and whether people would actually, have a different opinion at that time than they do now. And I've said quite a bit today, so I'll give everybody a little relief. Thank you.
Councilman Schwan.
Well, when we say that if this were to fail, the replacement and the increase, that we'd go back a second time, we are asking for two increases in this. We're asking the voters to increase through the replacement. We're asking them to increase based on the increased amount that we're declaring. So to kid anybody, to tell the taxpayers there are not two increases, they're just getting them simultaneously. They're getting them both with one resolution that this body would pass. I am not advocating that you don't give them the opportunity to make the choice. The replacement is what we're discussing right now. If this gets through as the substitute, I can assure you the other three are sitting right here on our desk. It would also be to put the increase on the ballot, to ask them, do you support the replacement? Yes or no? Do you support the increase on top of the replacement for two issues in this vote? Yes or no? How is that any different other than the fact that we are actually allowing the voters to speak on their own whether they want to pass one increase in the replacement and a second increase in the increased amount for all these new programs that are coming forth? That is all the differences between these two approaches. And to say, well, we want to push the taxpayers to only get one choice about two increases versus the option to have both choices. In our own personal lives, if we had this same choice, we would ask to have the consideration. Why wouldn't we want to let the voters do the same thing? Thank you.
Ms. Simon.
Thank you so much. Well, the voters will decide. I'm going to support this going on to the ballot, and I hope, with all the news of the opiate crisis and everything we're facing, that we will get support for the levy. But I just want to say thank you to my colleague Conwell to bring up the state funding unconstitutional case of DeRolf in 1993 that held that our school funding mechanism was unconstitutional. And the State House has done nothing since 1993 to correct that. And here we are having to do everything we can at the local levels, trying to make up for that, which they're not doing there. And I want to bring up the cut to local funding. Unfortunately, because the state has continued to cut us, that we are driving down to every local level to have to tax our residents, and especially in inner ring suburbs. We have safety levies now because the money's gone, because we can't afford services, police, paving our roads. So we have to keep going to taxpayers. But maybe if they would correct this at the State House, we wouldn't have to put the burden on senior citizens who own houses. But let me tell you, the inner ring suburbs our seniors are facing it, taking it a lot worse than in some of the other suburbs, because we don't have the money anymore to just keep up with local services. So I commend you for bringing that up and reminding us why we're in this position, in great part.
I'm going to just offer one comment. Being a believer in representative government, I think there's a part for us as elected representatives to play, and there's a part for the people to play. And I think our part as representatives is to take our best shot at what we think the county really needs over the next 8 years and put that before the voters as a single choice and let the voters decide whether they agree and whether they're willing to pay for it. And that's how I would separate it. Ms. Baker.
Yes, I keep hearing about the school funding and how the state hasn't done anything since years ago. I would ask you to do a little research. Over the last 5, maybe 8 years, the state has backfilled most of the poorest districts with funding that brings them up to the level of most school districts. So if you have a 10 or 12,000 per pupil cost expenditure, there isn't a school district out there that isn't equal to that. And maybe some of them are even higher. And that money comes from the state funding, which is taxpayer dollars. So the difference is that school districts that do have levies on the ballot are usually school districts that get very little to no state funding. But there are many school districts that get an enormous amount of money, and you see very seldom on the ballot those schools coming back to the taxpayers. So the difference is that they were backfilled by millions of dollars to bring them up to the per pupil expenditure. And in some cases, they're even higher than what some of the schools can afford in some of the other areas. But there has been improvement, and I would ask you to research that and go back and take a look at the budget of the State House and see how much money has been added to education to many of the poor school districts. It doesn't change districts perhaps like mine. We are still paying, we are still going on the ballot, we are pretty regular, but there are school districts that are not. And if they are, it's rare, and if they do, it's for a smaller amount because the state has backfilled what it is that they used to pay. And I would just ask that you take a look at that and see what funding has been appropriated.
Mr. Chair? Sorry, Mr. Tuma.
Councilman Tuma, followed by Simon.
I appreciate that. I think Ms. Simon's point is that the large burden has been placed on the municipalities as a result of many state cuts to municipalities, particularly the inner ring suburbs. So it might not be in the form of school levies or what have you, but lots and lots of cuts. The municipal fund was huge, a huge hit to municipalities, and they're still trying to recover, still trying to come back. Parma just put out asked for a levy on street funds because outside of county roads that are getting done there's not a lot of money to go around to taking care of roads, which they had used from funds that they had from the state for years. So the point being is that regardless of where those funds are coming, those cuts were made, and the municipalities are the ones paying the price. And now we're sitting here trying to come up with funding for health and human services again, and the burden's going to fall on the taxpayer in the municipalities. So however you want to get there, taxpayers are the ones who are paying the price for cuts that were made in the state. That has to be said.
Councilwoman Simon.
And just as a reply that I think my colleague Conwell brought up the funding mechanism. It's not backfilling and moving funds around from one public school to the other or diverting funds to ECOT and charter schools. It's about the unconstitutional nature of our school funding at the state. That's the question, not backfilling and putting Band-Aids. And I've done my research. I've seen how the the cuts and shifting and ECOT funds are continuing to devastate our schools. It's about the unconstitutionality of the funding. That's DeRolf. That's 1993. So I think you're aware of that case. The problem is the lack of courage and ability to make this right statewide.
Any further discussion? Okay, well, hearing Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair and to the electors, if anyone is watching live streaming us right now on this committee meeting, please remember to complete your 2020 U.S. Census, which will help us all do your part. So I definitely want to bring that up, because if you do your census, it's based on hospitals, roads, all this. We need you to do your part so taxes don't have to always be looked at as a measure to be increased. Thank you.
Having the opportunity to close the discussion with a statement that everybody can agree with. We're about to put the question, but before I do, I want to explain where we are procedurally so that everybody is very clear. We originally had a motion and a second to move the resolution determining to proceed, and on the proposal for a replacement plus a 0.8 mil increase. Councilman Schwan favors that we put two separate questions to the voter, one for the renewal plus replacement and the second for the 0.8 mil increase as a separate question. To do so requires 4 pieces of legislation, and Councilman Schwan moved, and it was properly seconded, to substitute the motion that was on the floor with an item that contained the first of those 4 items, the resolution of necessity for the renewal and replacement, with the intention clearly stated that if his motion is successful and the resolution passes, then the remaining 3 would be brought forward subsequently. Is that correct?
It is, and thank you for that clarity. Just bringing out the intent is to bring all 4 pieces when the first one passes.
So I'm now going to ask the clerk to call the roll, and a vote yes is to advance the idea of putting forward two separate questions to the voters by accepting the Schwan substitute, and a vote no is not to do that, which would leave the original motion on the floor.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
Will they be placed on at the same time? Yes.
The intent would be to do the exact same thing that we are currently considering with one piece of legislation, only to do with 2 separate pieces of legislation. It would still follow the same path. It would still follow the same requirement that we have to pass it, have to get it on the ballot in a timely manner. It would be on the March ballot.
And can I have a clarity from the law director? If they both voted to go on the ballot, and the lower one, the increase is only voted on, what happens with the replacement?
Jonathan McGorry from County Law Department. I did a little bit of research before coming to this meeting today. I knew this question was brought up. I'm not sure if your own council has had a chance to look into this, but looking at the language of the revised code section that talks about these levies, it does state that the resolution proposing a replacement levy shall specify the purpose of the levy, its proposed rate expressed in mills, and whether the proposed rate is the same as the rate of the existing levy, a reduction, or an increase. And it goes on to explain some other matters. So it seems to state that the resolution itself has to put everything in one. And listening to Jack's reasoning makes, it would seem like something like Jack's proposal could be done, but it would have to be your first resolution is the replacement. Your second resolution is the replacement of what you just approved plus an increase. And that is an area that, given the short amount of time I've had to look into, I would have to do some additional research to see if that is something that we could put on the ballot.
our internal counsel had looked at it and had said it could be done.
Okay.
Thank you.
The clerk will call the roll.
So at this point, I'm calling the roll on actually declaring the necessity, the first one, and if that does not pass, then we vote. You'll vote on the next one.
This one, the motion is only to substitute. So if the substitute is approved, then we would have to have another vote to refer the motion as substituted to the full council.
Okay, so you're substituting the original resolution number 2019-0253?
We're proposing to substitute 0253 with the Schron substitute. Councilman
Mr.
Toomer.
Chairman. Yeah, through the chair, just for clarification, to approve the substitute here would require what, a majority vote?
It would require a majority of vote in this committee.
In this committee, okay.
And a majority vote could send it to the full council, but it would require 8 votes for it to go to be passed.
Understood, thank you.
Mr. Chair, that'd be the same 8 votes required for any.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay,
Not any difference.
yes. Okay,
All right, Mr. Jones,
No.
Ms. Brown, Ms. Simon, Ms. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
no.
Mr. Tuma,
No.
Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Schron,
Yes.
Ms. Conwell,
No.
Council President Brady.
No.
6, 7, the motion does not carry.
Okay, the motion to substitute is not agreed to. We are back to the original question, which was to refer resolution 2019-0253 to the full council with recommendation that it be put on the agenda for the next council meeting for second reading suspension. This is the motion for the replacement plus 0.8 mil increase. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Brown? Yes. Ms. Simon?
Yes.
Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Tuma?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell?
Yes.
Council President Brady.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The motion is referred to the full council for December 10th. Is there any miscellaneous business?
Yes, Chair. If I could, from the director, earlier in our questions, it would be good to know, and I understand the future and understanding, what may or may not be needed or how it's going to be used. But if you could give us that breakdown for, looks like the majority of your list here is either new or enhanced. If you can give us that, a more concise list of Adams Board, that whole 5 million that's all new, I think. But there are other ones that are split. If you could tell us how much is a split and what is, even if you want to go by percentage of the amount, is okay with me. But
Certainly, I'll provide it. I'll provide a narrative as well as the numbers that go along with it.
that would be,
Thank you very much. Any other miscellaneous business? Hearing none with no further business before this committee, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
You would ask that.